The studio lights were bright, the cameras rolling, and the air already tense when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and delivered a line that instantly froze the room. It wasn't just sharp, it was surgical. She called out Pete Hegseth in a way that no one expected, stripping away his argument before he even had time to defend it. Viewers across the country would later describe it as the moment the debate turned into a reckoning. Pete, who had built his reputation on confident monologues and patriotic bravado, suddenly looked cornered. Crockett's words landed like a direct strike, not only targeting his claim, but exposing the weakness behind it. The panel, which had been locked in its usual rhythm of interruptions and half-shouted talking points, suddenly went silent. The pause was short, but deafening. For a man like Pete, silence was not his ally. His career had thrived on certainty, on speaking louder than anyone else. But here, Jasmine's precision cut through his volume. Her words didn't just refute his argument, they rewrote the entire tone of the discussion. Viewers watching live felt the electricity of the moment. This wasn't the usual exchange of talking heads. This was a confrontation that threatened to unravel Pete's image in real time. He tried to laugh it off, adjusting his tie and smirking, but the damage was visible. The confidence he wore like armor had cracked, and the audience could see it. The other panelists exchanged quick glances, sensing the shift. The producers in the control room, voices shaking through their headsets, urged the cameras to zoom in. Every second was now a spectacle, and everyone in the room knew they were witnessing the spark that would ignite a firestorm. The debate had been framed as another routine primetime panel designed to spark arguments and keep viewers glued to their screens. Pete Hegseth, the former military officer turned commentator, was billed as the anchor voice of conservative conviction. He walked into the studio with his usual mix of swagger and certainty, prepared to defend his talking points with force. Across from him sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, a freshman Democrat whose reputation for fearless confrontation had already made her a rising star. Crockett had faced down hostile committee hearings and relentless media attacks, earning a reputation for never backing away when cornered. Tonight, she was not just another guest. She was the wild card the producers had placed on the stage to rattle the formula. Alongside them were two other panelists, a veteran political strategist known for his measured tone, and a journalist who had built a career on fact-checking both sides. Both were prepared for the usual exchange of ideology and banter, but even they weren't ready for what was about to unfold. The topic was set: law, order, and the balance of accountability in government. Pete began by delivering a fiery opening monologue calling for strength, discipline, and tradition as the only way forward. His voice carried the weight of certainty, his hand chopping the air for emphasis, his rhetoric crafted to sound like common sense. Jasmine listened carefully, her expression calm but unyielding. When her turn came, she didn't raise her voice or wave her arms. She simply began to dismantle Pete's points, one fact at a time. The strategist nodded slowly as she spoke, clearly recognizing the accuracy of her details. The journalist scribbled notes, preparing to verify her references. The contrast was already sharp. Pete relied on emotion, Jasmine relied on evidence. He appealed to nostalgia, she appealed to reality. With every sentence she delivered, the audience could sense the foundation of the debate shifting beneath him. The cameras caught every flicker of discomfort on his face as he realized she was not playing by the old rules of sound bites and half-truths. By the 10-minute mark, the panel was no longer a level playing field. It was a battlefield where Pete's practiced talking points were collapsing under the weight of Jasmine's precision. The producers, expecting sparks, suddenly realized they were broadcasting a wildfire. Pete tightened his jaw, leaned closer to the microphone, and tried to reassert control. He raised his voice, insisting that Jasmine was twisting the truth, that her so-called facts were cherry-picked to fit a partisan narrative. But his words lacked their usual force. For the first time in the broadcast, his cadence stumbled, and his argument sounded more defensive than commanding. Jasmine didn't flinch. She met his volume with clarity, quoting specific reports and citing dates that directly contradicted Pete's claims. When he accused her of misrepresenting the data, she calmly read a line from an official government report that left no room for interpretation. The strategist on the panel leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised, as if silently admitting that Pete had walked straight into a trap. The tension escalated. Pete interrupted repeatedly, but each attempt to talk over Jasmine only made him look more desperate. She waited patiently, then delivered her counterpoints in full sentences that cut through his noise like steel. Every time he tried to twist her words, she pulled them back with precision, reminding both him and the audience of exactly what had been said. The journalist finally broke his silence, confirming on air that Jasmine's references were accurate. The fact check left Pete cornered. His frustration grew visible. His cheeks flushed, his voice cracked slightly, and his trademark smirk collapsed into tight-lipped irritation. Then came the moment that would dominate headlines. Pete raised his hand, wagging a finger toward Jasmine, and declared, "You can throw around your statistics all night, but the American people don't care about your numbers. They care about values." Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him, and replied in a tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Values without truth are just lies dressed up in slogans." The panel erupted. Gasps, laughter, even applause filled the studio. The strategist pressed his hand to his forehead. The journalist muttered, "Wow," under his breath, and Pete froze, blinking as if the words had physically struck him. The silence that followed was deafening. Pete tried to recover, stammering about patriotism and tradition, but the weight of Jasmine's line hung over the stage. His voice trembled, and for the first time in years of television battles, he looked less like a warrior and more like a man on the verge of collapse. The air in the studio felt charged, as though everyone was holding their breath waiting to see if Pete would recover. He straightened in his chair, forced a strained smile, and tried to pivot back to safer ground. "What Jasmine doesn't understand," he began, "is that real leadership requires standing firm even when the facts are uncomfortable. America needs strength, not nitpicking." But the words rang hollow. He had lost the momentum, and the audience could feel it. Jasmine didn't let the moment pass. She leaned in, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of finality. "You keep talking about strength, Pete," she said, "but strength isn't yelling louder. Strength is being honest when the truth hurts, and admitting when the facts prove you wrong. And right now, the only thing breaking down is your argument." The sentence landed like a hammer. Pete blinked, his mouth half open, but no words came. For a man who prided himself on quick comebacks, silence was the worst defeat. His hands fidgeted on the desk. His eyes darted briefly to the producers off camera, as though searching for rescue that wasn't coming. The panel reacted instantly. The strategist shook his head almost in disbelief, muttering, "That's it. That's the knockout." The journalist let out a laugh he tried to stifle, unable to hide his astonishment. Even the studio crew, normally invisible and silent, exchanged glances that betrayed the magnitude of what they were witnessing. And then it happened. The panel erupted. Voices overlapped, some cheering, some gasping, as the atmosphere shifted from debate to spectacle. Social media would later replay this exact moment endlessly, the freeze frame of Pete's stunned face against Jasmine's unflinching stare. Pete tried one last time, his voice cracking as he insisted, "This isn't about me, this is about America." But even as he said it, he knew the moment had slipped away. Jasmine's line was already the headline. His breakdown was complete, not in tears or rage, but in the collapse of the very persona he had built. The eruption around him only amplified his defeat. The louder the reaction, the smaller he seemed. Jasmine didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't even smile. She simply sat back in her chair, letting the silence confirm what everyone already knew. She had won. The dust settled slowly, but the impact of Jasmine's words lingered like a tremor that refused to fade. Pete sat stiffly, trying to compose himself, but his silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. The panel, still buzzing from the explosion, gradually shifted back into discussion, yet the conversation had changed forever. No one was dissecting policy anymore. They were dissecting Pete's collapse. Clips of the exchange were already flooding social media within minutes. Hashtags soared, memes spread like wildfire, and commentators declared it one of the most brutal takedowns ever seen on live television. Some called it the moment Jasmine Crockett cemented her reputation as one of the most fearless voices in politics. Others framed it as the night Pete Hegseth's confidence cracked on camera. The strategist, in his closing remarks, carefully noted that moments like this weren't just about two people arguing. They were about what the public demanded from leadership. The journalist echoed that sentiment, pointing out that truth, once laid bare, has a way of stripping away all pretenses. And Jasmine? She didn't need to say another word. Her savage line had already done the work of 10 speeches. It was the kind of moment that politicians dream of, the kind of soundbite that outlives the debate itself and becomes a marker in the public consciousness. For Pete, the damage was lasting. His attempt to recover fell flat, and while his supporters rushed to defend him, even they couldn't erase the images replayed across every screen in America. For his critics, the moment was proof that bluster without substance eventually collapses under pressure. The final takeaway was clear. In the arena of politics, words can be weapons sharper than steel. And on that night, Jasmine Crockett's words cut through not just Pete's defenses, but through the noise of partisan bickering, reminding everyone that truth and courage still have the power to shake the stage. As the credits rolled and the lights dimmed, viewers knew they had witnessed more than a debate. They had seen a defining clash, one that left Pete Hegseth broken down, Jasmine Crockett elevated, and the panel erupting in a way that would be remembered for years.